Welcome to Vicksburg, Mississippi. Vicksburg is a historic city. It's located in Warren County, Mississippi. It has a population of about 24,000 people. Located on a high bluff on the east bank of the Mississippi River across from Louisiana, Vicksburg was built by French colonists in 1719, and it was an outpost that withstood an attack from the native Natchez people. It was incorporated as Vicksburg in 1825, and it was after Methodist missionary Newt Vick. That was the founder, or the name of Vicksburg comes from, is Newt Vick. In the American Civil War, it was a key Confederate river port, and its July 1863 surrender to Ulysses S. Grant, along with the concurrent Battle of Gettysburg, marked the turning point of the war. The city is home to 3 large installations of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, which has been involved in flood control along the river. As we go along our historic tour, we'll learn a little bit more about the history of Vicksburg. Our first stop talks about the Jewish community in Vicksburg. In 1841, Vicksburg became home to the first established Jewish congregation in Mississippi. That congregation was, and she said, sorry, I probably said that wrong, meaning men of kindness in Hebrew. Many of the early Jewish immigrants came from what is now part of modern Germany. Jewish families were welcomed into the community. The Jewish community in Vicksburg initially lived quite modestly as peddlers and small merchants, but after the Civil War, many grew to be very prosperous. By the early 20th century, most of the businesses in Vicksburg were Jewish owned. On this street that we'll be walking down, which is Monroe Street, many homes bearing the names of Jewish merchants still exist around Vicksburg, and many of these homes are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. For example, this large home that you see in front of you here belonged to a prominent Jewish businessman named Joseph Basinski. He operated a farm and raised horses on land about 3 miles to the south, along with a livery stable and dry goods store. In 1857, he purchased the lot, and the construction of the home was completed shortly after the Civil War. Here he raised his 14 children, and his descendants lived in this house until the early 20th century. Built before 1837, this was once the office of Sergeant Smith Prentice, a famous lawyer and politician. Prentice was well known and loved as a remarkable orator. Daniel Webster, one of the foremost orators of the day, stated that he had never beheld a speaker as powerful as Prentice. While settling the founder of Vicksburg will, he was involved in an ongoing legal dispute over valuable riverfront property. Prentice had become one of the wealthiest men in the state by developing the property until the case was reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court. This and other complications led to his economic downfall. His premature death in 1850 at the age of 41 left the nation grieving the loss of a well-spoken and bright man. Fanny Johnson spent her life helping others and avoiding publicity. She funded 2 YMCAs during the days of racial segregation. The blacks-only YMCA was located here, right in this area, with the white-only YMCA 3 blocks away. Along with many other acts of kindness, Fanny was also responsible for building a Salvation Army facility, an Episcopal church for blacks, an All Saints College dormitory, and an orphanage. There is only one known picture of Fanny Johnson in a large group because she really shunned publicity. This is the Vicksburg Memorial Auditorium. This building here is Vicksburg's first bank. Built in 1834, Planters Hall housed Vicksburg's first bank. During early banking in Mississippi, state laws required the bank president and his family to live on the second floor of the bank. When the bank failed in 1842, the building became a private residence. During the Civil War, or after the surrender of Vicksburg in July 4th, 1863, many of the local homes along this area were occupied by Union troops during Reconstruction. Planters Hall, this building right here, was used by Union General Elias Smith Dennis for his headquarters. Take a look here at the Vicksburg Memorial Auditorium. It was built in 1851 in honor of those who fought in World War II and the Korean War. Beginning in 1957, the Miss Mississippi pageant was held in this Art Deco building for 40 years.
Exercise ring closed.
Governor Turkey Runner. In 1838, Alexander McNutt was elected the 12th governor of Mississippi, serving until 1842. After 2 terms as governor, he moved back to Vicksburg to continue his law practice. During his lifetime, McNutt was acclaimed as a witty teller of stories, but his abilities as a humorous writer were little known. His stories were printed in the popular Spirit of the Times and were signed The Turkey Runner. Probably only the editor and a few others knew for sure that this was McNutt's pseudonym. Many of the stories were about the adventure of Jim and Chunky, 2 backward guys who worked on a wealthy cotton plantation named the Captain. Governor McNutt lived in this house right here. It was constructed in 1826 and purchased in 1829 for $900 by Alexander McNutt. This home has withstood Civil War battles and ravaging storms. The rear addition towards the house was at the rear of the house was added in 1838 when McNutt married Vicksburg native Elizabeth Cameron. The Bethel African Methodist Church, AME Church, was founded in 1864 when purchased from the First Presbyterian congregation. The original building, built in 1828, was replaced by the current Romanesque revival structure in 1912. The church became known as the Mother Congregation of African Methodism in the state of Mississippi. Campbell College was built next to the church and became the first African American college in Mississippi, established without the help of whites. In 1897, the college moved to Jackson, Mississippi, and was absorbed into Jackson State University. Built in 1830 and surviving the Civil War, and Chuca was named with the Choctaw Indian word meaning happy home. In 1868, the house was occupied by Joseph Davis, the oldest brother of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, a very successful lawyer and plantation owner. On Christmas Day, 1868, President Johnson issued a pardon to all persons involved in the Confederate Rebellion, and Jefferson Davis was released from prison. Jefferson later returned to Vicksburg, and it's believed that the locals gathered at Chuca to greet Davis, and he spoke to them from the balcony. Built in 3 stages from 1830 to 1855, this Greek Revival-style mansion was originally built by J.W. Maudlin and sold to Victor Wilson in 1840. Added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1981, Chuca was Vicksburg's first columned house and its first antebellum residence to open as a tour home. We're now in the Springfield neighborhood of Vicksburg. You're in Vicksburg's oldest neighborhood, where many structures are called antebellum homes. Antebellum is derived from the Latin word meaning before the war. This home, called the Duff Green Mansion, was built in 1856 by cotton broker Duff Green. He built the mansion using skilled enslaved labor and bricks that were fired on site. This grand home survived the siege of Vicksburg because Green designated it as a hospital where both Confederate and Union soldiers were treated. After the surrender, recuperating Union soldiers took control of the home. This is Vicksburg's oldest public building, Christ Episcopal Church. The cornerstone for Christ Episcopal was laid in 1839, but a fire and yellow fever epidemic delayed completion until 1843. The cornerstone was laid by Bishop Leonis Polk, who later served as a major general in the Confederate Army. During the siege, church doors were left open and daily services were held. All of the windows, except one, were destroyed by Union gunboat shelling. 2 of the destroyed windows were later replaced by world-renowned Tiffany windows. Just up the hill here, right about there where you see the tower, is what's called Constitution Firehouse. You see the cupola on top. It was built in 1870 for $3,600. The cupola was actually constructed in 1837 for the original firehouse and was moved to the new firehouse when it was built. This is Christ Church Rectory, where the lead minister of the church lives. Hey, how you doing? We're now at the intersection of Main and Cherry. Back in the day, back in the 1800s, this was a busy and lively area. Everything you wanted or needed was nearby. Court Square, churches, retail stores, and the Mississippi River were just a few blocks away. Just across the street over here, we'll get a closer look here in just a second, is the old Warren County Courthouse. The Reverend Newt Vick, the Vicksburg founder, originally planned to build his home on this site. However, after he and his wife both fell victim to yellow fever in August of 1819, this site was set aside to forever be a public square. Built atop one of the highest bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River, the courthouse was completed in October of 1860, just 2 months before Mississippi seceded from the Union. After the new courthouse was completed, Eva W. Davis saved the old courthouse building from being torn down. In 1948, it became a museum and was the first building in Mississippi to become a National Historic Landmark. And this Art Deco building over here is what it's called, the new Warren County Courthouse. Guessing by the bars on this window that this is the old Warren County Jail. This building is known as the Featherstone Magruder House. In 1831, Richard Featherstone, a teacher, built a single-story structure here and opened Vicksburg's very first school. Dr. Alex Magruder expanded the house to 2 stories in 1850 and used the original as a clinic where he treated victims of the 1853 yellow fever breakout that killed nearly half the population of Vicksburg. Sold in 1869 to Nathaniel Thomas, the house was later owned by Tom Morrissey, a steamboat captain and liquor dealer. Built by slaves in the Greek Revival style, the house was remodeled with Italianate features. Since Union prisoners were housed next door at the Warren County Jail, the Magruder Morrissey House suffered only minor damage from Union bombing during the 1863 siege. Tom Morrissey, a creative entrepreneur, purchased this home in 1907. When Mississippi became the first dry state in 1918, Tom set up a saloon on a barge across the river in Louisiana. Vicksburgers could take a short boat ride to a saloon and continue to purchase alcohol. This house here is known as the Belfour House. Built in the mid-1830s, it was home of Emma Belfour, noted diarist of the siege in 1863. It was the site of 1862 Christmas ball interrupted by the arrival of a federal fleet. Following surrender on July 4th, 1863, this was the headquarters of Major General J.B. McPherson. This beautiful church here is Crawford Street United Methodist Church. In the 1800s and early 1900s, this part of Cherry Street was an affluent residential area lined with spectacular homes. This home here is known as the Rose Home. In 1897, Adolph Rose, a prominent banker and wholesale merchant, built this grand home with a unique section of exterior siding. The Rose family lived in the home until 1923 when it became a residence for ladies. Later, Morrissey Hospital that was behind the home used it as a nurse's dormitory. This home over here is known as the Bloom Home. Solomon Bloom, a prosperous merchant from Delhi, Louisiana, had renowned architect Leonard C. Link design his home. Link was the architect for many outstanding structures throughout the South, including the state capital of Mississippi. He also designed the master plan for Louisiana State University and designed 9 buildings, including the famed Memorial Tower. Solomon unexpectedly passed away during construction of this grand home. His widow Teresa had the home completed and moved in with her sister in 1903. Across the street over here we have the First Presbyterian Church. The First Presbyterian Church was built in 1910. As Vicksburg grew, so did the number of churches. 10 of the largest churches were along the Vicksburg trolley route in the early 1900s. This is the Vicksburg Warren County Memorial. While it's wintertime now, you won't see anything, but this is called the Rose Garden. In 1887, the state of Louisiana placed the first Confederate monument here. This is the very first Confederate monument in the middle of Monroe Street. The monument preceded the establishment of the National Military Park by 12 years. Later, the city of Vicksburg dedicated this garden to honor all veterans. The World War I monument was placed in 1923. Brothers William and Henry Allen are depicted on each side of the monument. They were two young men from Vicksburg who died 21 days apart in Europe during the First World War. This building over here is the old Carnegie Library. In 1910, Vicksburg communicated with Andrew Carnegie about the need for a public library. In 1916, the Carnegie Library was completed with a majority of the funding donated by the Carnegie Foundation. This building served as Vicksburg's library for 63 years. Across the street, you see a fountain. It's known as the Bloom Fountain. Louis Bloom set aside $6,500 in his will to purchase a fountain for the city of Vicksburg. Bloom was a notable Jewish businessman who had lived in Vicksburg most of his life. After his passing in 1926, the executors of his will reached an agreement with the city, and the fountain was placed here in 1929. This building over here, while it's been remodeled and torn down a little bit, was one of the first hospitals in Vicksburg. And this is the United States Post Office and Courthouse. This building here is Vicksburg City Hall, or Old City Hall. Looks like it's still currently the City Hall. Was constructed in 1902. What a gorgeous building. Right here, this building is owned or operated by the Mississippi River Commission. The Mississippi River Commission, they are the ones who are responsible for ensuring that the Mississippi River doesn't flood, that it's used for transportation, that it is to sustain economically and environmentally as well. It's also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters for the Mississippi River Commission, known as the Mississippi Valley Division. Beautiful brick building. Building here, that what is the Mississippi River Commission, was actually built in 1894. It's called Sky Parlor Hill. It was removed to build a new post office, actually the old post office that was built in 1894 for the growing city. William Alfred Verrett, former Confederate soldier, designed the building along with many others, including the old Louisiana state capitol in Baton Rouge. This building with the unique bell tower on the top is St. Paul Catholic Church. See if we can get a good view of the... Oh yeah, there's the bell tower up there. We've now reached Washington Street, the main commercial district of Vicksburg. If you look, the Mississippi River is right down there. And many of these buildings, although there's been a lot of changes over the years, some were here back in the late 1800s. Some are newer or refurbished. I'm sure there's been a lot of changes to these buildings over time. We'll take a stroll down Washington Street and take a look at all the different shops and all the buildings. back after the Civil War, none of these buildings were here, and the businesses really needed some money. The freed slaves had begun working out in the field as sharecroppers, where they owned a portion of the fields and received payment instead of being slaves. And often those sharecroppers would come to town and spend their money. So following the Civil War, commerce grew and expanded through not only those who helped to reconstruct the city, but those who were freed as part of the Civil War. Very vibrant and cool downtown area.
Right. She was on the pants. What do you think?
Down here is the Mississippi River. Looks like we have a channel of the Mississippi River, and across the little island over there is the actual Mississippi River. You could kind of take a look down here. There's a really cool children's playground area. It's relatively new. And along the flood walls there, they're all murals. Building over here, the Biedenhorn Candy Company. We're going to do a tour of that in just a little bit, but that's where the first bottles of Coca-Cola were actually produced, inside that building. There'll be another video on that, as well as a video of the Biedenhorn home in Monroe, Louisiana. Hope you enjoyed this tour of Vicksburg. If you ever have a chance, get here. It's an awesome place to visit, much to see and much to do. Pretty cool place. Talk to y'all later. Thanks. Bye-bye.